Conventional medicine and the health industry, the $60 billion a year business, has disappointed us, and thank God we are searching for holistic approaches to healing. Even science cannot deny what other cultures have known for centuries, that food has amazing healing power, and the secret to good life and good health could literally be found in our own backyards, in our own refrigerators. I'm Audrey Hope. I welcome you to Real Women for a special episode called The Healing Power of Food. My special guest is Dr. Neal Barnard, author of Foods That Heal Pain. This is the show the pharmaceutical companies don't want you to see. This is the show that can save your life. Dr. Barnard, what can we eat? What are the pain-safe foods?
Well, actually, even many of the triggers you can have, once you've found that wheat or citrus fruits or tomatoes aren't a problem for you, but there are certain foods that we know never seem to trigger problems for anybody. And where this is of concern is arthritis, migraines, which we've talked about, fibromyalgia, which is a condition that's increasingly common, particularly among women, pain not in the joints but between the joints and tenderness. Foods seem to trigger that as well. And digestive problems, digestive pains like irritable bowel and Crohn's disease. And let me show you some of the foods that never seem to trigger these. First of all, rice, which doctors have been fans of for a long time because it's very low in fat, and Asian cultures have almost no heart disease. The cooked yellow vegetables like squash, the orange vegetables like sweet potatoes and carrots, just about all the green vegetables, but they ought to be cooked to knock out some of the proteins that, for some folks, can trigger digestive pains. But whether that's broccoli or spinach or Swiss chard, if you have fruit, choose the non-citrus ones, dried or cooked. So you put those together. Right at the time when you're trying to figure out what your trigger foods are, you're going to want to avoid the triggers and focus on these pain-safe foods. They're like a bandage for the body. And then bring the triggers back into the diet after the symptoms have settled down.
You mentioned sweet potatoes, yams.
Right.
They have natural progesterone?
Yes, that's exactly right.
And that's very good for women. I know my mother right now is taking estrogen supplements, and it worries me.
Yes.
She's afraid of osteoporosis, and she keeps thinking that she has to drink milk and that the doctors are bombarding her with calcium. And you talk about it's not the calcium, but it's the calcium loss that we have to deal with. Can you explain that?
That's right. Osteoporosis, this bone-thinning disease, which is a problem, especially in women, especially in Caucasian women after menopause. And the problem never was a lack of calcium intake for most of them. The problem is they're losing calcium abnormally quickly. It's coming out of the bones, into the blood, filters through the kidneys, and is actually lost in the urine. And there are two parts of the diet in particular that seem to determine how quickly you're going to lose calcium, and they're going to surprise people. The first is sodium, just ordinary table salt. If you cut your sodium intake in half, it's the equivalent of taking 800 milligrams of extra calcium per day. What happens is that sodium resets the kidneys so that they just lose calcium like crazy. You cut the sodium in half, you save calcium. Same thing with animal protein. So many people switch from beef to chicken to fish and back to chicken and so forth. They're keeping so much animal protein in their diet. Animal protein compared to plant proteins, beans and whatever they may be. The animal protein doubles your calcium losses. So if we take volunteers and research subjects, we take the animal protein out of their diet, we cut their calcium loss in half. You take the sodium out of the diet, very similar effect. Now you do need calcium in your diet. I'm not a big fan of milk. We've already talked about it triggering pain in many people.
But milk, you're saying, does cause cancer too.
Well, there's a lot of evidence now that we're very concerned about in this way. For breast cancer, we see much more breast cancer in women who are milk drinkers versus those who don't. We see more cancer of the ovary, and there's been some new, I guess, areas of concern for prostate cancer as well. We don't really quite know what to make of that. With regard to breast cancer, we have good reasons why that would be the case. There are estrogens in milk. It comes from a pregnant cow. The dairy cows are
pregmarine?
Well, that's something we're going to get to in a second, maybe. But the cattle are impregnated because that keeps their milk consumption up, and the estrogen gets into the milk. And in addition, there are growth peptides, little protein fragments naturally in milk, because what's it for? It's to make a calf grow quickly. That's what nature designed milk for. Sometimes you don't want to grow quickly, so you don't want these growth factors in something you're slugging down every day. So there are many other reasons to be concerned about milk, but for those who think, well, calcium in milk, there is calcium in milk. It's only 30% absorbed by the body. The other 70% never gets into your body at all. Green leafy vegetables have a much higher absorption fraction, so we're pushing those. And if you just really don't eat either one, the new fortified juice products have a lot of very highly absorbable calcium.
Would that be vitamin C?
Yeah, they have vitamin C, and they also actually add calcium to them, that whether it's orange juice or some of the apple juice products. And so we have our choices out there happily.
And you say meat is very dangerous.
Well, yes. I mean,
okay, you came from a background, I read, of cattle ranchers.
Yeah.
Do you still talk to your family?
Well, yeah. You know, it's funny to mention that. I grew up in North Dakota, and it's true. My father grew up on a cattle ranch, and all my uncles and cousins are still in that business. But you know, these are not our enemies. These are our family. You know, and
Right.
So I'm concerned about them too. And my parents had to change their diets because they had cholesterol problems and other health problems. And actually, they're vegetarian now. So my father doesn't know it. My mom brings home the little hot dogs from the health food store that are made of soy.
Right.
He's perfectly happy with them. But yeah, meat is a problem. Even the leanest meats have a substantial amount of saturated fat in them. And they tend to cause the arteries to continue to get blocked up. We're doing studies on menstrual pain, where we're doing something different. We're using very low-fat diets not to lower cholesterol levels, but to lower estrogen levels. The estrogen, the female sex hormone, it goes up and down every month in a woman's monthly cycle. High-fat foods cause extra estrogen to be made. That can make the menstrual period much more painful for many women. So in an experimental study with Georgetown University's Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, we've been working for the past 2 years with women who have really severe menstrual pain. And 40 women have already finished the study. What we find is that when we take the animal products out of the diet and we keep the vegetable oils low too, that's important as well. So no onion rings, no olive oil dribbling all over our pasta. We're going to keep all the oils low. We find that their menstrual pain either goes away or diminishes dramatically in about 2/3 of cases, and about 1/3 doesn't get so much effect from diet.
Is this the reason why low fat would also prevent breast cancer?
Probably,
I mean, you're talking about
yes.
the estrogen. So women
Right.
really have to keep the estrogen level low, and that is through a low-fat diet.
They have enough estrogen for fertility, but yes, exactly what you're saying is right. In fact, that's how I happened to discover this. It was several years ago. A woman called me up. She said, "Dr. Barnard, I need a prescription for some painkillers. Can you help me out?" And I said, "Sure." But it hit me. We use a very low-fat diet for cancer prevention, and it works by getting the hormones in better balance. You have enough estrogen, but not the excess. It suddenly occurred to me that perhaps the diet change might help her with menstrual pain. No doctor had ever recommended this before, and we hadn't done the studies yet at that point. It helped her enormously. She called me after 4 weeks and said, "Dr. Barnard, I've got one question for you. Why didn't any doctor ever tell me about this before?"
That's a good question.
And so we have put it to the test, and we now have good research showing that it's not the answer for everyone. It's not magic, but for most people, it helps, or it can even make the pain go away. Which, for women who have come into my office saying, I can barely get out of bed, one day every month, it has been just a lifesaver for them.
Okay, so let's review again certain illnesses and what's good for them. You're saying for
Okay.
migraines, coffee.
Oddly enough, people who drink
That's great for me. I love coffee.
You know, it's a funny thing. People in general who drink a lot of coffee often get more headaches, especially if you miss your morning coffee. But at just the point where a migraine is kicking in, if you have 1 or 2 cups of good, strong black coffee, it'll actually knock the headache out in many cases. Wow. Can I mention sugar?
Sure, please.
Sugar has a bad press, and I'm going to give it even worse press. When we take volunteers and we put a little metal clip on this soft spot between their fingers, and we hook it up to an electrical generator, and we gradually turn up the electricity. We do this on college sophomores. Just kidding. We ask them to tell us when they feel any pain, and when does it become intolerable, and then you switch it off. You then give them sugar, and ask them again, when do you feel pain? When does it become intolerable? What we find is that the sugar causes them to feel pain much sooner, and it becomes painful. They feel the pain sooner, it becomes intolerable sooner. And even people with adult onset diabetes who are running high blood sugars, they feel pain sooner. It becomes more intense. Sugar intensifies pain through its effect on neurochemistry.
I have personally experienced that through my illness with the inner
Yes.
imbalance. I mean,
most people
it was
never
absolutely
realize it.
I would not be here today if it wasn't for that diet, honestly.
And what do we do?
I was so ill.
We take our morning cup of coffee, which has analgesic effects. We throw a couple lumps of sugar in it, which makes pain worse. And through the rest of the day, we are mixing the foods that trigger pain and the foods that fight pain. Once we learn how they work, you've got control that you can use for the rest of your life.
Now, what can we do for diabetes?
For
I mean, it can be healed. Can it be completely healed?
If it's the adult onset form, yes, it will go away in many cases. Not in every case, but in the studies that we have done, about 2/3 of people improve, and in many cases, I mean, they're off all medication. And what we want to do is a couple things. We want to follow the artery opening kind of diet because fat impairs insulin. We want to get so the vegetarian foods are great, but one caveat here. I want to use the high fiber foods. So not so much white bread, white rice, white pasta. Have it with the fiber in it. So whole grain bread, brown rice. That slows the absorption of the natural sugars the foods hold and keeps the blood sugars in better control. For people who have advanced diabetes, they often get pain in their legs, pain in their ankles. We call it neuropathy. That will go away. I'm going to use this kind of diet, and I'm not going to cheat on it. No chicken, no fish, no added oils. But I'm also going to add exercise. Exercise is a painkiller in many ways, but it gets the circulation going, and in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that neuropathic pain that a lot of people are told they're stuck with, it goes away.
Well, you mentioned that also for the back. You said a doctor would recommend that you stay in bed and you take it easy, and you're not saying to do that.
Worst thing you can do. You want to have lots of exercise, as much as that your doctor will let you get away with. And in fact, in finely trained athletes, the kind of person who's running, 5K, 10K, you can attest their pain tolerance. You put their hand in a bucket of water and say, how long can you stand this pain? You write it down. And then after they run a 5 or 10K, it's the equivalent of 10 milligrams of morphine.
And it also raises the serotonin in the body? Can you talk about that?
Serotonin is a brain chemical, and it's involved in pain, it's involved in moods, it's involved in sleep, and our appreciation of all of these things. And certain foods raise it and certain foods lower it, but it seems to be a very individual thing. Sugary foods will raise it, which for some people makes them feel good. For other people, they get irritable, out of sorts, and as we said, they have pain worse. So I think it's useful for people to understand how these foods affect them, because there's a lot of individual variation from one person to the next.
Well, Dr. Barnard, this has really been fascinating, and I thank you again for writing this great book, Foods That Fight Pain. Especially, I thank you on behalf of my family. You have many of the problems that you discuss in this book, and I recommend it to all the viewers out there.